Being overturned.
Yeah.
We had an election happen. War. Just a whole bunch of stuff happened. So it's not just like the illness. It's also like, yeah. And you're stuck at home dealing with it, you know?
Right. Yeah. The connectivity isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're having to deal with a trauma compounded by other traumas. And then what does your body do when that happens? And then what does your body and mind do when it's done? So like when you're, I like to call COVID. So as an Army veteran, I like to call COVID the civilians deployment.
Well, that's a good one.
You know, and I say it tongue in cheek, and I don't say it to diminish civilians in any way or people who didn't serve in the military. But, you know, when you served in the military, you went without a lot of things. You went without comfort items. You went without communication to loved ones. And then you also watched a lot of your friends die. Right.
And then you're also in these intense conditions too, living and working.
Right. So everything is kind of a high op tempo and things like that. However, you know, a big difference is that people in the military signed up for that, right? Like I volunteered. Nobody made me join the military, you know. I wasn't drafted like our Vietnam era folks. And nobody asked to be put into COVID.
Yeah.
You know, like, so our civilians were pulled into this shit show. And I think some of our, you know, military counterparts and veterans and things like that were like maybe a little bit better prepared because they were just kind of like, okay, like they, as we say a lot, we just embraced the suck and we just kind of like leaned into it. But then as we're kind of navigating this post-COVID era, I think it's still good to look at our veteran population holistically to see maybe where we're going. Because although, you know, a lot of service members and veterans leaned in, you know, and maybe handled COVID very, very well. What we do know, there's, you know, so much data and so much research that shows that a lot of our veterans have PTSD and struggle with addictions, homelessness, suicide, right? So we have all these things that compound, you know, how our veterans are, you know, being treated and how they are handling their stress. And I think that's something we're going to see a similar dynamic in our civilian population. And it, you know, it'll be decades until we're able to kind of like take a step back from it and do the research. But for our folks that are kind of like in it now and like, oh, and starting to notice this shift, like we're not in COVID anymore. Yeah. Right. We are in post-COVID, right? Things are, you know, generally open. Things are generally moving.
I agree. Like, I think there's definitely, even like during, like when you're in that shelter in place for so long and you're just sitting alone with your thoughts, like a lot of stuff is like gonna bubble up. Because like I mentioned earlier, like those defense mechanisms that you have where you can just, you know, focus on your work, or those things like those walls you build up, or those things that, you know, like that monkey mind that keeps you organized, and those things that you did to help like navigate the trauma, like going to the gym or going to yoga. Yeah. You couldn't do that. So everyone's like at home, you know, just alone with their thoughts and trying to stay sane. And yeah.
And so now that we're thinking of it kind of that way, let's say you've experienced a traumatic event that's not COVID, and it's let's say it's a car accident, a very serious car accident. Now that traumatic event lasted, you know, moments, right? And then maybe your recovery time lasted months. You know, let's say it was a 6-month recovery time, and that traumatic memory may stay with you for a long time. And so now we're talking about COVID, which was essentially like a 2-year event. And so we're just out of that. So your brain and your nervous system may have been in a heightened state. And for a lot of us, it probably was. You may been in fight or flight. You may have had, peaks of adrenaline, things like that. A lot of folks kind of leveled up in the sense that they just did what they had to do to survive and get things done. If they were losing their jobs, losing their loved ones, they made it through. They aren't quite sure how they did it, but it was, their body took some necessary steps to make that occur. Cortisol levels and things like that are going up. Everything's kind of, your body's producing a lot of hormones and chemicals to ensure your survival.
Yeah.
And so now that's a super long, prolonged event, much, much longer than the moments of a car accident, right? And so now how long is it going to take for your body now to integrate that 2-year spike that you had?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're just starting to get into that now, right? People are starting to dip down. They're starting to maybe feel a little more safe. Maybe they're starting to also feel a little more raw.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things are happening internally with humans, right? So humans right now might feel like very, very depressed or very, very anxious, but don't know why.
Yeah.
Right. So like pre-COVID, if they were depressed or anxious, they could anchor it to something, like the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, a big event. But since we all experienced this huge COVID thing, we kind of just all did it together and now it's kind of all done. We're kind of almost forgetting about it in a sense, that we're just kind of like, that was no big deal. That was, we're all kind of like back at it more or less. But your body keeps the score, right? So that your body is going to continue to kind of be processing that elongated trauma, and it will manifest in your mind and in your body, maybe with anxiety and depression that you can't quite identify the source. Does that make sense?
No, yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. Like for me, I used to not mind crowds. Post-COVID, crowds make me anxious. Like, I much rather not deal with going to places where it's super crowded because I don't want to be confined and dealing with people's like breath and coughing and everything like that. Or I don't know if like you hear someone sneeze and you get heightened, like, oh God, please don't sneeze on me. Like, or you hear someone coughing, same with like on a plane. Like I'm super comfortable now traveling without a mask, but sometimes like, for example, I came back from Kansas, I'll be like, man, I wish I would have brought a mask with me because you hear people coughing and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're more aware, like, oh, like there's just recycled air going through. There's no like good filtration system happening. People probably sat here before me. Did they thoroughly clean this? Should I like what? It's just like these new nuances, like new little quirks.
Right. Yeah. And so like some of the quirks I had, like when I was a kid, we grew up poor. And so like we didn't always have like electricity or water or hot water or towels, but one particular item was toilet paper. And we just like, it was almost like a luxury item. Like we didn't always have toilet paper. And so like when I, entered adulthood, I've always had toilet paper. Like, and that makes me so like happy as an adult.
You're killing it. You have toilet paper.
Like that's like my standard of success. I'm like, I got toilet paper in my house. So when COVID had the toilet paper, like shortage, like those were old traumas that came up. And I was literally just at my house crying because I didn't have toilet paper. And it's not like I don't know what to do when I don't have toilet paper. Like I've lived without toilet paper. I'm a veteran. I've done all the things outside, but like my baby sister, like she knows those, like my quirks. So she just comes over with a little 4-pack of toilet paper. And so it's just like, so just watching those things bubble to the top, because when COVID first started, I didn't really take it seriously. I was like, things are just going to bounce back in a week or two. I'm like, everybody's just kind of freaking out. I wasn't worried that we wouldn't have access to toilet paper for such a long period of time or access to other things. Obviously that wasn't the case, but now like, we're talking about behavior change. Like when I decide I'm out of toilet paper and I have to go to the store, it means that I buy a huge thing. I've got two big things. And when the one big thing is gone, that's when I go to buy the next one, because I just have one on deck. I always have one on deck, so So my standard of like what is out is different. And same thing with like laundry soap too. Like I always have one extra. And then
I do that. My husband thinks I'm so weird for doing that, but I do that with things. Like I will buy at least 2 of something. If I know I'm running out of 1, I'll buy 2 so that when I use the 1, I know that I can just replace the 1. So you're just constantly replacing the 1.
Yep.
And it's always great because when you think you're like, oh crap, I'm out, and you check your storage, you're like, oh look, I have extra.
Exactly.
It's like the best feeling ever because you feel prepared and you feel secure. Because there's like situations where money's low and you can't afford it, like you're in, you know, or access is low and you can't get it right away.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember during the pandemic, like right before, I got sick. Prior, it wasn't COVID. I just had like really bad GI issues. So I remember buying like, you know, toilet paper in bulk. And then the pandemic happened. And everyone's talking about how they're out of toilet paper. Like the only place I found toilet paper, I remember, was at the dollar store. But I remember being so grateful that I got sick prior because I had all this toilet paper.
Yeah.
But cleaning supplies were out. You know what's so funny? All the industrial like cleaning supplies, like the harsh chemicals, were sold out, but all like the natural plant-based cleaning supplies that were still on the shelves. Like everyone was like, we need the things, like forget this like free beef stuff. We don't know.
We need the real deal.
Chemicals. Yes, we want all the chemicals. But I remember feeling angry at the beginning of the pandemic because everyone got to like, I remember venting to my therapist because everyone got to like go home and like shelter in place. But with my job, because I was working in safety at the time, we still had to work. And I was so mad. Like I remember being in the car with my therapist being like, why can't I go home? This is ridiculous. Like, why can't I telework? I'm so annoyed. And then finally, like maybe like a week or 2 later, they're like, okay, all right, now you guys, you're not essential. You can telework because they have to figure out how to keep us working. Because I didn't think like, I was thinking this was like a great little like break, like, oh, like, you know, and I was jealous everyone got to go home. But I didn't think like, oh, I'm grateful that I'm still working, right?
Right, yeah.
But then once they figured out how we could telework, I was able to do that at home. And it was nice because I didn't have to come in and it was like a nice little break.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think like I was started telework in February. I didn't come back to work and they did like an alternate shift thing in June. And when I came back, I don't know if this happened to you, like, but did you feel like there was like a loss of time? Like when people talk about stuff, you're like, that happened?
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like a blink.
Yeah.
You know, like because we're about to, you know, it's 2023 now, we're rolling into 2024. Jody, our studio manager, reminded me that we're coming up on our 4-year anniversary of the studio because we opened the studio April 1st. April 1st, 2020.
Oh, wow.
Right? During COVID. So we had bought the studio in February, knowing we were going to open on April 1st because the previous owners were rotating out their military. One of them was PCS into another duty station. So they were just going to close. So we were just going to take it over. So March was our more or less like our right seat, left seat ride. But that's when obviously COVID happened. And
but you're still here. So how is that like navigating a business during that time? And then, especially because like yoga, you have people here, right?
Right.
And it requires people to be in close proximity. And so how was it like navigating your business in 2020 versus now post-COVID? Because I know from when I worked at a studio in Ohio, there was a lot of like COVID procedures.
Yeah.
So how is that for you guys?
Yeah, for us here, so we never closed. We couldn't have people in the studio for a while, but we would do everything online. So we never stopped offering classes. And so at least for me, it was just, you know, my military training just kicked in and we just leaned in. I was like, you know, 'cause I kind of treated everyone as like a casualty, you know, even if they weren't dead or dying, or, you know, everybody was, you know, COVID was an injury. And the whole thing we were experiencing was an injury. And I was treating it, just triaging all of our humans. And so I just kept really letting them know, like, we will remain steady. this is your steady spot.
Okay.
So you can join us online, you know. We would have like black market yoga. We would do, you know, so because we would record some things and we would do it, and we'd just call our friends and be like, hey, you want to just come? Yeah. You know, so our friends would come do yoga live with us behind the camera while we were doing it on the camera. And at that time, I actually wasn't a yoga teacher. When I took that over, I was just a yogi. And a lot of our instructors at that time didn't want to be videoed. They were very, very self-conscious. And so being on camera was like, they were not okay with the vast majority of them. So what it turned into was essentially my partner, Mike, and I doing yoga every day on camera while this instructor cued us.
Oh, nice.
So but it was exhausting. It was just extremely taxing on the body, because when you're the model, so to speak, you're really trying to make sure you're showing a good posture, you know,
trying to be perfect.
Right. So people, you know, and show, you know, proper variations. And it's something, it's a challenge when, you know, particularly, I guess, if you're not a yoga instructor, and I'm not you know, even though I'm a yoga instructor now, I'm still not like, I can't pull my leg over my head. There's a lot of things I can't do. I have, you know, restrictions in movement.
So it's challenging on the mind as well as the body.
Yeah. So Mike and I were just basically exhausted the first month. And then, you know, so we started we remained steady. We stayed steady. And then we tried to expand the steadiness to the first layer, which is our instructors, to get them steady, and then have them help our humans get steady. And then it just kind of went that way. So we treated it almost like a mission. Like, all right, we're in mission mode until we're not in mission mode. And that's how we just treated COVID the whole time, checking in on the people, letting them know that this was a place that they could come for rest and respite, and to recharge, and to vent, and to cry, and just for whatever. And then, you know, eventually, you know, we started meeting outside. We were doing stuff at the park, you know, and then we were doing like a lot of HIIT classes too, you know, to get people's heart rate up and get their blood pumping and things like that. Because when you're angry, you have to work. If you're going to process anger through your body, you have to increase your heart rate significantly. So you have to like burn it off essentially. So that's what we were doing with a lot of people in the park. And we were burning it off.
Yeah. And I bet you it was like a nice like place of solace, because it's like, ooh, I have a reason to go outside, you know, because like there's only so much TV you can watch, you know. And
right. Yeah.
I think that was the one nice thing about staying at home, was like learning how to enjoy nature again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you take any hikes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's for sure. We definitely we hiked a lot. Hiked almost probably every day.
All over, you know,
just
mid North Carolina.
Right. And so did a lot of people too. So, you know, Mike and I would hike anyway, but we did notice like a lot of more people coming outside, you know. So as people were navigating COVID, they went outside, which is something that, at least from our observation, didn't occur a lot, because Mike and I are always outside, always sitting on our deck, always walking around the neighborhood. And there's just like a ton more people, like the whole neighborhood was doing it now.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people, therapy has become a lot more accessible to people. You know, therapy was almost like a taboo word, certainly pre-COVID, but even in the years leading up to COVID, only like crazy people got therapy. But now everybody's like,
doing
my therapist said, you know, just as like a part of conversation, and nobody blinked bats an eye. They'd be like, oh, that's awesome. Let me tell you what my therapist told me. Like everybody's got a therapist. Everybody, the accessibility to therapy has become much easier too. You know, like with BetterHelp and all these different apps you can get on, so you can see people virtually, like
therapists using sliding scale options. Yeah.
And it's so there's a lot of, so as we're kind of like trying to discover what COVID did, where we are and where we're going, you know, beginning to notice some of the benefits, you know, as hard as that may be to swallow, you know, maybe starting there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go the whole length and say, I'm thankful that COVID happened and that all my friends died, or all my, my parents and family members died, and all those things. But, you can
just like
you can take maybe a little step. Like, I'm happy that I'm comfortable talking about my feelings with another human.
I remember, I remember watching This Is Us. Have you ever watched This Is Us? And it's a very emotional show. And I remember, like, that was the first time I cried so much. But I think watching that show during the pandemic gave me permission to cry. Yeah. And it was like floodgates. Like, I think it was like 72 hours of me just crying nonstop. Because, like, the show's emotional, but, like, it just awoken, like, oh, I can cry. Like, it's okay to cry. Yeah. So that was nice. But I think a lot of people, too, like you heard, like, there's, like, a lot of people who, like, the quiet quitting, or they're, like, developing hobbies during the pandemic, but also, like, they're rediscovering, like, their why, or learning, like, hey, this 9-to-5 job is, like, cool and everything, but I want to start my own business. Like, they had time to, like, create business plans and stuff like that. Cause you see a lot of new businesses are opening up and people leaving corporate world to do that, which I think is beautiful too. Like, I remember I was in San Rafael and we came upon this little surf shop, and this couple, it's owned by this couple, like, the husband's like a surfer. The wife manages, like, the operations and stuff. The husband's still working corporate, but he's, like, the idea guy. And she's, like, the one that manages the store. But she said, I was like, oh, how did you guys do this? And they said, during the pandemic, we just realized that this is something we wanted to do more than, the traditional 9-to-5 route. And so it's like, figuring out what makes you happy and going towards that. Yeah. Yeah. So there was, like, a lot of trauma, but also some little nuances came out of it too for a lot of people.
Yeah. And really, growth doesn't occur until you've suffered enough. You know, people aren't going to really grow and take that huge next step until they have suffered enough. So a lot of people during COVID suffered enough to really take inventory of what's important to them and what they value and what their goals are, and then also what's possible. Maybe they don't need 6 figures to be happy. Maybe they're the goal that maybe they had set for themselves. Yeah, so corporations have what I like to call FU money. They just have so much money. And I think the perception for a lot of people was that if I work hard enough, like if I start off at a lower level and I work hard enough and I do this and I do, and I just keep going, I can make my way up. And I can also have FU money. Yeah. But I think what people are becoming to realize is that they will never have the FU money. Yeah. The FU money is just for that level. Yeah. And they will continue to dangle this carrot in front of you to have you kind of think that someday it'll happen. Someday it'll happen. Right. Yeah. They're just kind of gaslighting you to get there. And then, now people are just like, well, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my own thing and I'm going to make my own FU money, you know, or maybe I don't need FU money. I need just what I need and happy. I can live an extremely happy and fulfilled life, which kind of brings us back to something that you were talking about too, about like quiet quitting. Those people know that the people that are quiet quitting are the people that know they're not going to make that FU money. So why kill themselves? Yeah. And what I'm actually seeing with some of my peers is one of my peers was quiet quitting and got promoted. Now this person works within the Department of Defense. And that I was like, that says a lot, right? Because so the people they're promoting in that particular section are people who are just doing the work. They don't want somebody who's innovative. They don't want somebody who's trying to create changes. They don't want somebody who's being all the things. They're like, oh, you're a yes man or a yes woman or a yes human. Promoted. And they promoted this person. And I was just like, I was floored, but I was also like, no, don't be floored. That's you know that about that organization and that agency. They want you to be a yes man or a yes woman or a yes human. And
did they take the promotion?
Of course. Yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah,
like you know, I mean, because they have no intention of working any harder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the job, they're working hard on things that matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they're living a fulfilled life, but just not at work.
Yeah.
So I mean, heck, I would take the money. Like, why not? Like, just take the money, take the money and run until they can figure out what their next step is. Maybe it's staying there and continuing to quiet quit, or maybe it's retiring at some point and
working on,
having their own business or this or that. So, you know, it gives them some time to figure it out. But it was also, you know, for me, it was like data collection. It's like, oh, that's an interesting data point.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, noted. You know, and so that's happening in the Department of Defense. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm sure that's happening in other industries, right? Other corporations, other places. You know, and that's, I mean, you know, why we always hear about like toxic leaders and things like that. I was like, all right, that makes sense. These toxic leaders made it into that corporate hierarchy because they were yes men or yes women or yes humans, not because they were necessarily good at their job.
I believe that.
Or lead. I mean, of course, some people are leaders, but.
Yeah. I believe that because, like, when I was working in public health, my last job, it was really hard, and I was in a leadership position. And I remember, like, you know, working during the pandemic. Like, it wasn't like the first year of the pandemic; it was like in 2021. So we had like these new surges and variants come out, and you know, we had the vaccine and everything like that, and so we're working to promote the vaccine, encourage people to get vaccinated. And then like there was policy that came requiring it. So that was helpful. And so I had to like constantly read and digest policy. Like I was staying late, and it was like a system where like I didn't want to, like I would even like get my hands dirty, like work with my team. But I was also there just to eliminate hurdles for my team as a leader. And I remember I had this one guy, one civilian I worked with who worked for me. He had to quit. And the reason why he had to quit was because he had like a lot of health issues that I didn't know about until he brought to my attention. And it was like a huge shock to me. And I'm just thinking, what can I do to get this guy to stay? But I was also thinking, like, what does he need? So instead of him just quitting, I was like, do you want to just take a leave of absence?
Yeah.
Do you still have the position? You know, what resources can I get for you to help you figure this out? And he was like, no, this is just what I need to do. And I just had to accept it. Like, it was going to suck for me, but at in my heart, I was like, I'm not about to throw money at someone who had health issues, is having health issues. Like, I just want this person to heal and be healthy. And it helped me re-navigate something. So I encourage my team to communicate with me if there's issues happening, and then just to figure out how everyone can work together, because this guy was doing all this stuff by himself. He was like coming in on his off time to like work on this stuff, which, you know, he didn't have to. And I would encourage like comp time, like, oh, if you do this, let me know how many hours you work and I'll make sure you get the comp time and figure that stuff out. But when he told me that stuff, I was like, okay. And so I had to be like, because he wasn't communicating that he needed help. So I had to like make sure like his team was helping him and said, moving forward, you guys need to help this person. So this guy is looking overwhelmed, go help him. And so it just made me be more conscious of like the people who work for me, just to see what's going on with them, and then just encourage them to like, because I'm not a bad guy. I'm not like, this job is stressful. My job is stressful, but my job as a supervisor is to make sure you are able to do your job. So if you're unable to do it, let me know and I can help you figure out how to do it. I'm not going to fire you, because when we work in the government, it's like an act of Congress to fire you. So as long as you're not doing anything dumb, different, or dangerous, we'll be able to get the job done. And honestly, sometimes I would have to take the hit and be like, and I learned about priorities. I'm like, listen, this is not a high priority for me right now. listen, public health is not the only group of people working on this. Like, I need help because I was burnt out. Everyone kept throwing stuff on us. And I'm like, my team is doing so much. What are y'all doing? And then I had like more help come. And I remember I had like senior leadership. Like, I remember I had the senior master sergeant. This colonel came up to me and was like, hey, I need help with this. And he said that in front of my senior master sergeant, my master sergeant. My senior master sergeant was like, he should not have done that. You need to go to your squadron commander and tell him what's going on. And they need to help you figure this out because this is not your responsibility. He's like, I can see why you've always been stressed and anxious because that shouldn't have gone. So it was nice to have like someone else look at the problem and be like, this is not your responsibility, because it like gave me permission to have more of a voice and advocate.
Yeah, and set better boundaries, right? And like protect your team and protect yourself.
Yeah.
You know, from, you know, shit rolls downhill, right? And and they're just trying to throw shit on you.
Yeah.
You know?
Because
and then if you'll pick it up, then they're going to keep throwing it, right?
Yeah. Because my job before that, I just remember being always stressed out because it was like something. And you're just like, And, you know, the boss I had before, he did a good job shielding and like checking on us. But, you know, he left for another job. And then this other boss came and our director was just intense. And so he didn't know how to navigate because he was just trying to be like, oh, okay, cool, director, we'll, you know, do that. And then he's like delegating it down, and it just was so stressful and not fun. And this is like during the pandemic where we had like teleworking, and it was still stressful. And I was like, I don't like this. So it was nice to be able to leave and get another job.
No, I bet. Yeah. And like, as people are like, we're kind of going back to the topic, right? Like, what does happiness look like post pandemic? I think people are starting to navigate that now by quiet quitting, by setting boundaries, by doing these things. Because what I hope the direction that people are going in, if they haven't already figured it out yet, is that the power is with the people. Right. And so, the top, the 1% or the top 10% or whatever it is, these corporations or these whatevers that have the FU money and have all the other things, they cannot operate without us.
Yes.
They just can't.
They cannot.
And so the more people are regaining their autonomy and asking those questions, like what makes me happy? What do I want to do? And, and like that guy that you were just talking about who made the choice to quit, to take care of himself. Like, that is an extremely difficult, vulnerable, but the most important choice to make, and what we were seeing during COVID, and now hopefully it's coming out even more during post-COVID, is that people are finding their voice, getting the courage to make those kinds of decisions. Because the more we're able to kind of like reclaim our power and take our power back, the more we're able to do it in mass, the more voice we are going to have, and the more, not autonomy, that's not the word I want, the more control we're going to have over our destiny, right? Because right now, this top layer has the control because they've got the power of the purse, but they need us to continue that. And if we take that back, then what do they have?
Yeah.
Right? Like they need the worker bees. They need us to kind of be compliant. And the more we're able to free our minds and free our bodies and, and process all of this, the quicker we're going to get there. So at least for me, holistically, COVID is pushing the human race as a whole in that direction, like very forcefully. Nobody wanted to do it, but I think like, the world, like if we're just looking at the whole earth, right? We're always talking about like climate change, saving the rainforest, all these things, but like the universe is going to self-correct.
Yeah.
The universe is like bigger than all of us, and so it's not going to die. It's not going to, like, we always talk about the humans killing the universe and and I'm like, I agree. We're doing all kinds of crappy things, but the universe is going to wipe us out. Right. Like like with, through all the things, like it's going to self-correct. And COVID was an element in the self-correction.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it killed a lot of people, but But the ones that remained now have a choice to make, right? Like, it's not great that all those people died, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but we can't change that. They're dead, right?
Yeah.
They are gone. What we have is left is what we have, and now these humans that have remained get to make a choice. Am I going to dig into myself and make myself better? Am I going to polish myself? And am I going to make something we do in the military is we're always like, we never want our brothers and sisters in arms to have died in vain. You know, we are like extremely adamant about that. Like they will not have died in vain. When they kill our people, we just go even harder. And so like having our, you know, our human race, like start to get into that mentality, like, yep, we lost millions of people, but guess what? Now I'm fucking going harder. You know, and you go harder by digging deep into yourself, finding that best self, finding your why, finding what you as an individual were put here to do with your individual gift, and just taking it to town, right? Taking it to task. Be like, this is my gift. And by God, I am not going to die until I have, you know, crafted this gift within me, and then I've given it to everybody else.
Have you read Becoming by Michelle Obama?
Yeah.
So she talks about like when her dad died and when her best friend died, that happened to her.
Yeah.
Because she went the traditional route. She, you know, went to the Ivy League school. She became a lawyer. She worked at like a corporate firm. She rose through the ranks. But when she experienced loss from her really close friend and her dad, she just reevaluated her why, like what was a priority for her. And she decided to go for a change and decided to work nonprofit. And her partner, Brock, they worked together to, you know, establish, okay, what does that look like financially? So she looked for the careers and stuff like that. And that's what changed for her, because she figured out what her why was, you know? So I thought that was really cool. I'm reading her new book now, and she talks about a lot of the stuff that happened during the pandemic, like a lot of, she did like a lot of like virtual talks and meetings and like with people just and children and teenagers talking about all the different things they had going on. It was really interesting. So yeah, I think a lot of people are doing that now, just reevaluating, and because also things that happened during the pandemic, like divorce happened. And so that was something too, just reevaluating relationships, because, you know, you're stuck at home with that partner and you probably are seeing stuff that you never paid attention to because you guys were busy working. You're together. Because when I came back to work, I think I had 2 coworkers going through a divorce. I'm like, what happened? And, you know, one found out some infidelity stuff. The other one just realized like they didn't like the way their partner was treating them.
Right. Like, is this my ride or die human? Yeah.
And you realize, like,
you know, like, I guess you weren't. Like, we went through a serious traumatic event together. You were not ride or die. So peace out. We're going to find my ride or die.
Yeah. I'm happy I found mine, because me and my partner, we got closer during the pandemic.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it was nice. There was moments, but all in all.
Baptism by fire at points.
Oh, yeah. But we're still here. But that was nice. But how is it like for your child, like your son, going through the pandemic? Because I know like a lot of kids, they're graduating from high school and they're doing that. They did that during the pandemic where they had to like, you know, do classes online and
I mean, they're a special little group of humans, right? So, you know, my kiddo came out as trans too during the pandemic. So Annie also went through puberty during the pandemic. So like those were a lot of things to deal with. So he was like taken away from his friends, put all by himself. So basically he went probably, I don't know, it was like months. I want to say like 6 months maybe, where he like just didn't come out of his room at all, like only to go to the bathroom. And that's it. Like I would bring him food. He wouldn't even come out to eat. Like I couldn't get him out. I would try all kinds of things. I ended up fostering a puppy during the pandemic to try to like, you know, help increase his mood. And that helped, you know, we had like varying degrees of success with a lot of those things, but it was really tough. And then take that, you know, then deciding that that was the time he wanted to come out as trans. And then also going through puberty, right? So like, I feel like he decided to come out as trans then because he was starting to go through puberty and was like, he was growing boobs and things and getting a period. And he was like, what in the fresh hell is this bullshit? Like, and he's just like, what is happening to my body? And so I think as he was navigating that, he's like, well, maybe if I tell my parents I'm trans, then we can teamwork this out, we can war game this. But also during that time, he was like, as teenagers are, like a sassy little motherfucker. And so like, like just my patience level was just like, all right, just be patient. So there was probably almost a year solid where he was like mean, treated me terribly, was extremely disrespectful. And I just took it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like I just took it. Cause I was like, I'm not, I just responded with love every time. Like I'd ask, it was like my breathing irritated him. So I'd ask him things like, hey, honey, have you eaten today? What would you like for me to make you for dinner? And then he'd just snap right back. I can't remember the things he'd say, but he just, I would just say something like that. And it would just like irritate. And people who are parents of teenagers are like nodding with me and listening right now. They're like, oh my God, I got 5 of them at home. Right. So like, this is not just like my kid. This is all the kids. This is how teenagers are in general. Like they just become little assholes for a time. And so
as a former little asshole, I promise you, as we get older, we are nicer again and a little bit more apologetic. Because I have moments. I remember I was at yoga teacher training and I was at a coffee shop and I think there was a cheer competition. So I remember this girl was like such an asshole to her mom because I was a cheerleader. And her mom was like buying her and her teammates coffee. And I immediately was like, I need to call my mom and apologize. Because I saw like this girl mimic the behavior. And I was like, oh my God, I was the worst. And I called and like apologized.
Yeah. So. And so like for parents going through that, the only thing I just remind them or as a gentle reminder. So because this is a common, every teenager does this. I don't care what kind of kid you have. Your kid will at some point turn into an asshole, but it will be brief. Science has designed them this way because during that time while they're going through puberty, in order for them to survive, they have to break away from their parental unit and create their own life. Yeah. And so this is, has come through, many, many generations of the, human evolution. Yeah. And so what it's essentially turned into now in 2020, they don't actually have to break away from us to survive. They can stay, but all of those different patterns that have gone through their bodies for generations and thousands of years are still in there. And so they're essentially breaking away. They're coming into their own. And in some cultures, they have not, fun ceremonies like that, like quinceañeras and things like that. And so the more I think we can kind of honor it. And be as patient as you can going through it. Like it's literally just a phase. Like if they were a good human before puberty, and then they're just a shit human right now, just give them just as much as my advice to parents is just love them, bite your tongue as much as you can, and they will come out on the other side. Like unless they're a crap human going in, but if they're a crap human going in to puberty, it's probably because you were a crap parent. So like figure that out too. But be patient because these kids are going through and then going through puberty and all that through COVID, And so also for me is I put him in therapy too because I was going to ask because I was like he wouldn't talk to anyone, he wouldn't talk to me, so I got him a virtual therapist. He agreed to do that. And as far as I know, they just probably talked about video games or anime, but it was still, he got to talk to a human who wasn't me, who was a balanced, neutral, good human for an hour a week. Right. And I'm like, whatever, I don't care. And he would do it and it would make him happy and he wouldn't complain about it because I don't know what they talked about, but they just probably talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. And he looked forward to it, so it wasn't thankfully it wasn't something I had to force him to do. It was something he was just okay with. He was okay with it at first, and then he was just continued to be okay with it until we kind of ended it and kind of started to come out of his shell. But
is that where the LGBT kid hangout idea was birthed?
Yeah. Because when Kai came out during the pandemic, and he was like really isolated so much. I was really trying to help him find peers, but also help him understand what it means to be trans, because I think that there's, you know, a binary view of being trans. Like you have to look like this or like this. You know, you're either going to look like, you know,
masculine,
right? You're either going to look like RuPaul or you're going to grow a mustache and beard, right? Like there's these two dynamics. And so I had a lot of trans friends then. So, you know, I kind of like filtered them through the home. Like a couple of them would like come and visit. And so we'd let them stay at our house for a few days. And so then they could see how they interacted with each other and how, you know, and to see like the spectrum of trans humans out there, to kind of give them, you know, without actually telling them, because you can't tell a teenager anything, but just like showing it them, like that these other humans exist and that you don't have to, my objective was to show them that you didn't have to pick one thing. Yeah. And you could be anything, anywhere on that spectrum at any time, and you could change your mind. And you know, like you could present feminine one day and you could present masculine the other day.
Like a Pokemon.
You can just, right. Like you can just be who you want to be. Just, and so, yeah, so we started this LGBTQ kids hangout. So it was like once a week, we're just holding space for LGBTQ kids to come together and hang out. And so I started it for my kiddo, and we only had a couple kiddos that would come in the early days. But even in the early days, I'd only got my kid to come to a couple, and then he stopped coming because he was going through his thing. So he would just sit there. So sometimes I would force him to come, and he would like sit in the corner and pout. Like I was like it was the most traumatic experience in his life. He wouldn't talk to any of the other humans that came. And then he would eventually like beg me not to bring him. And so then I just left him at home because I was like, you know, I just kind of throw my hands in the air. I created this group for my kid who doesn't even come. But it eventually, you know, he kind of shook it out, right? Like he went through his thing. He's now no longer like that. And he's kind of like the king of the group now. Like he manages them in the sense, like he's got this like no bullying policy. He's created these rules for the group that they all have to adhere to. And but they're all like wholesome rules. Like, and so he just, and when one person starts to maybe bully another one, he's like jumping on it, and they've got a Discord page. So he's like managing the Discord. And like he's only 15 and he's just so cute about it now. But there was he went through a phase. Yeah. And even now he could look back on it, and this is what he tells me. He's like, yeah, I was going through some stuff. I'm like, bless. I'm like, all right, because when they're little, I felt like, you know, chicken nuggets or M&Ms could solve all your problems. Yeah. And then now I'm back to that phase where it's like mostly chicken nuggets can solve all of his problems. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, out of that, nothing works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so for our, and so I guess as we're looking at our humans, you know, as we're appreciating what COVID did to us, appreciating what COVID did to them as well, because us as adults, you know, our frontal lobe is already done. You know, it's done being cooked, but all these, but our nervous system is obviously still growing, and so is theirs, and their frontal lobe is still developing. So what I would imagine as, for children that experience trauma of any kind, one of the things that is very nurturing and helpful for their frontal lobe and their nervous system is to be held and to be like hugged and to be snuggled. So like closeness. So which is why you can never hug a baby too much. You can never spoil a baby. So if you have a child or a preteen or a teenager, you know, that, you know, maybe more closeness is the recipe, and they may, it may be also weird to you because let's say you've got maybe like a 10-year-old who wasn't clingy, but now all of a sudden is clingy and like just want, you know, and you're kind of like, you're looking as a parent, you're looking back and you're like, you were like fine. And now why are you so clingy? So as a parent, I would just say, embrace the clinginess. Like they need that closeness to help their nervous system grow, and then just let them cling. You know what I mean? Like embrace it. And then like, it'll eventually work itself out. Like they'll get the neurons and all the neural pathways will develop. The frontal lobe will finish developing. And I mean, they're not going to cling to you till they're 16, but it'll happen quicker than you think. And if for some reason your kid is being clingy and maybe not clinging to you for whatever reason, or maybe they don't feel comfortable clinging to you, you know, like particularly I say that because for a lot of reasons, but like particularly like in our military community, like if you're like an absentee parent, you're deployed a lot, that kid may not want to cling to you because you're just not there. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of that situation. What I would do for that child is I would get them a dog or a cat, like an animal, because they can still develop those neural pathways with a pet. And so if you can't be that human for them, or maybe you're just a human who doesn't like physical touch.
Yeah.
Does that, you know what I'm saying? Because not every adult is not like a physical touch kind of thing. Like they're just like, they're like, Sheldon, I only want to touch you one time a year or whatever that is, and if you're that parent, they still need the physical touch. I'm not saying that you have to do it, but you can task that out.
Yeah.
You can farm that out to get them a kitten, get them a puppy, get them something that they can cuddle, and their nervous system will still grow without your touch. So that's what I would tell people is that as they're navigating themselves, and then as they're watching their humans, the more patient they can be, which I know is extremely difficult because they may not have patience for themselves even. And then I'm asking them to extend patience to their child, but then also to another animal. I know I'm asking a lot, but if you're able to maybe just throw your hands up in the air and say, fuck it, chuck it in the fuck it bucket. That is a tried and true path.
So. Speaking of, we have kitten yoga coming up.
Oh, we sure do. Yeah, I think it's on July 11th. I think, yeah.
So, want to snuggle with kittens? Come.
I know, right? Yeah.
And goat yoga.
Oh, yeah. We do goat yoga
twice a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it second and fourth Sunday? Yeah.
Yep.
So you can snuggle with goats and kittens.
That's right.
But as we come to the end, is there anything else that you want to discuss on this topic?
No. Just remember, people, love yourself. Bring out your gifts. Do the best you can. COVID sucked.
Yeah.
COVID sucked. It absolutely sucked.
It did
appreciate
suck.
that it sucked, but appreciate the process that it's going to take to come out of the suck, and that it's not going to be linear and it's not going to be immediate.
I think something you said was really good, that out of suffering comes salvation, right? So it did suck, but if you are able to find the good or take a moment, maybe meditate to figure out, if you focus on the suck, it's going to keep sucking. But if you figure out like new avenues to help, you'll go towards the light and you'll find that salvation.
Right. Because we can't help that it sucked.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, your loved one doesn't want you to suffer.
Yeah.
They don't want you to suffer.
No.
So you honor them by not suffering and or finding your way out of the suffering. If you are suffering, don't beat yourself up. Just find your way out. You honor them in that way. So that way none of them, we don't ever want to lose any of them in vain. So
yeah. Anything you want to promote, Lindsay?
No. If you want to learn more, you can go to StanfordYogaCenter.com. We do a lot of classes there that to help integrate traumas and things. But thank you so much, Elise, for joining us today, as you do every day. Let's talk about it. And guiding the conversation and keeping us sane.
No problem. Well, thank you for this lovely topic. This was a great conversation. And tune in next week.